This is Kristen Rail at Wakley's Point Bass, and we're going to be going on a tour. We're going inside the Wakley Inn, and you are invited to come. Rob Nuri, president of Historic Point Bass, and he will be showing us around.
Thank you. This is the Wakley house. Actually, it's one of the things that's interesting. I should correct Kristen a little bit. For a lot of years, this has been called the Wakley Inn, but in reality, our research tells us that this building was actually the Wakley family house. The building that served primarily as the inn was located a little ways north of here and was taken down in about 1860, 100 years before that. So this building was primarily their house. We believe it was built in the 1840s. And it is what's known as a Greek Revival style house, which was very common at that time. It's a 4-square house, which would have a stairway in the center. The stairway isn't here at the moment. It had actually been moved somewhere in the intervening years, and we're going to be putting it back where it was. The house is about 20 feet by 30 feet, which means 600 square foot downstairs and 600 square foot upstairs, which makes for a fairly compact house. Built using what's known as the Chicago balloon style construction, which means that it's halfway between the way a barn was built using big corner posts and big girders and the modern way we build houses today with 2x4s. So it's kind of the halfway in between style. The house was lived in actually up until the 1980s, so this house was lived in for almost 150 years. And there were a lot of changes made in those 150 years. And our biggest job so far has been to take away all those modern changes and figure out how the building was built to begin with. And our goal is to put it back as close as we can figure to what the house was like when the Wakley family lived here. I'm standing where the stairway probably was and where we're going to be putting it back. Behind me were 2 rooms divided off by this wall. And actually, if you look carefully, you can see right up at the top of this wall, there's a bit of a stain in the board up here, the floor joist. And that stain is from where the plaster was on this wall, and it's plastered right over the edge and left that stain. It's one of the clues that we use to figure out what was here. Downstairs here was probably a sitting room and a bedroom, and that's how we're going to be setting it up. The front portion of this area will be a sitting room or a parlor, similar to a living room in today's houses, and a bedroom in back, and probably upstairs were bedrooms as well. The room we're standing in, again having a stairway coming up here, probably would have been a combination of kitchen and dining room. Perhaps also where Mr. Wakley and Mrs. Wakley, for that matter, ran their business. In the corner, or excuse me, in the center right here, there probably was a wood stove. There were not fireplaces in houses like this, but it was already in the time when they would have had large metal stoves, both for heating and cooking purposes. And there was a chimney that came down on each end of the house, again, fitting the style of the Greek Revival house. That had been changed sometime in the intervening years to a center chimney, which we took out several years ago. We'll be putting the end chimneys back up again. Again, upstairs would have been bedrooms. There's not a full basement under this, but rather something that's more like a root cellar, just under about half of the house itself, and then a foundation around the rest of it. As you can see, we've got a lot of work yet to do. We'll be replastering all the walls. You can see the wooden lath that held the plaster. A lot of plaster had been removed or damaged through the years, so we're removing all of it except for a very few places that it's still in good shape, and then replastering the walls in here, putting the interior walls back up and putting a ceiling back on the thing. We've already replaced the wood floor back to what it was in the original days. And hopefully within the next few years, you'll be able to come down here and see this house as it would have been when the Wakeleys lived here. The Wakeleys did live here up until the 1890s, and then it went into other families' ownership.
What are all these objects hanging up on the ceiling?
Well, we open the Wakley house up for tours every now and again, like this weekend we're open. And what we've done down here to decorate a little bit is hang some of the plants that Mrs. Wakley and other women at the time probably would have picked and dried, either for medicinal purposes, to use as drugs, or to make their house smell a little better, or maybe for cooking later on. And so some of the flowers that you see drying up here are also just because they were attractive, just like we dry flowers today. So,
We're looking at the front of the house.
okay. The front of this house, actually, it's interesting, it's what a lot of people would call the back. Because most people, when they here, they drive along Wakley Road and come up to the side that they run into first, and that's the side for a lot of years would have been the front door. But actually, when this house was built, there was no Wakley Road. There was no County Z, no Highway 73 or 13. The place you would have traveled was out on the river, which is out that way. And the way the Wakley family got here originally was on a boat. And most of their customers came and stayed in the inn or did other business. Robert Wakley was a postmaster as well as, I'm sure, kept a small store here. Most of the business came by way of the river. He also operated a ferry that went across the river. So this was the front of the house. On a Greek Revival house, it's tough to tell because they're built square. They've got a door in the middle in the back and a door in the middle in the front. And windows spaced evenly on the face of the house. The way you can tell, though, is what we've done is we've recreated this doorway. This is real fancy compared to the other side. The other side just has very simple molding around it, but you put your fancy molding on the front side. So it's really the only way you can tell this is the front of the house rather than the back of the house. We're also putting new siding on. The siding had been replaced in 1926. We found some newspapers underneath the siding as we took it off, so we knew when to put it on. And that had been put on a real small siding style of the time, but we're going back to the wild siding that was a style of the 1840s when the house was first built. So eventually we'll have it sided all the way up, and the siding itself will be painted white because that was the original siding color, and the trim was all in a forest green. And that's what we're turning it back to, hopefully soon.
This is a garden similar to a garden that the Wakeleys would have had.
Unlike today, when we can just go to Capsule or County Market or Bob's Castle Food to get our meals, the Wakeleys, by and large, had to grow everything they wanted for their foods. And what we've done here is recreated an area that is similar to what the Wakeleys' garden would have been. One of the things that's interesting about it is we've used plants that grew at their time period. Today, for modern agriculture, they've changed a lot of the plants, and some of the plants that we eat today weren't even known about in the 1840s. Well, what we've done is found sources of seeds that are the same kind of seeds from the 1840s, and those are what are being grown here. We've got down in the end corn, and then some tomatoes coming in, and after that we've got a couple rows of beans, and then there's one of the kales. I'm not sure what we've got planted in there. A few rows of peas, and then we've got some cabbage coming in here, and a couple of rows of various kinds of squash. One of the things they had to think about was making sure that whatever they grew, they could either use right away, or can, or put in some kind of storage, because they didn't have a refrigerator, didn't have freezers. So they had to can their tomatoes and make sure that any of their root crops could be put up in a root cellar that's underneath the house. One of the things you see around this garden is they have to have a fence. The fence was a way of keeping the critters out. We haven't quite finished our fence, so I hope they don't find our food before we get it harvested. But this is one of the kinds of fences that were used on the property. And we'll show you some more fences as we go around, because certainly they had lots of fences, and they all had a specific purpose. This was designed so that the sticks would be close enough together they'd keep the rabbits from coming in. You didn't have rabbit wire like you might put around the garden today.
Does Wakley have planted all these flowers?
Oh, probably not. When you think of the work that a farm wife or a tavern owner's wife, like Mrs. Wakley, had to do, she probably didn't have time to put in lots of flower beds. Some of the other people who've lived in this house in the intervening years, though, Mrs. Otto and Mrs. Schrader, they've been responsible for putting in some very beautiful flower gardens down here. And these gardens were here when we acquired the property about 10 years ago. So we've tried to maintain them, just because a lot of people think of how nice it would be to have flowers around. But if you think about it, even the green grass that we've got around here, they didn't have lawnmowers in the 1840s. Most of this around the house would have been mud and a few weeds. Mrs. Wakley may have had a few flowers around just to try to make her house look nicer, but probably not as much as we've got here now.
What are you planning on doing with this?
All this stuff? This is actually a building, a disassembled building. It's a log cabin, It's a cabin that actually stood up between Wisconsin Rapids and Buren, right along the river, near where the nursing home is, about where Quintal's Creek comes into the Wisconsin River. A couple of years ago, the people who owned that cabin, actually owned the house that the cabin was part of, called us up and asked us if we wanted it, because they were going to take it down and build a new house on the site. So they called us up and asked us if we wanted to disassemble the cabin and use it down here. So we did, and it has been waiting for the last 3 years now to be reassembled, and we're just now getting to the project of reassembling this cabin. This cabin was built about 1860, about 20 years after the Wakley house, and it seems, from what we've been able to learn of the local history, that it was actually used as a trader's cabin. People going up and down the river would stop at this cabin and trade for food or whatever supplies they might need. So we're going to set it up as a trader's cabin again. It's kind of fun. We had this thing in the parking lot last year, and we wanted to see how it fit together. If you ever played with Lincoln Logs, yeah, this thing is just Lincoln Logs big. It works just the same way. You put them together, they lock in place, and hopefully by this fall we'll have the cabin back up again. Right over here, kind of like where it was where Quintal's Creek comes into the Wisconsin River, this will be sitting where Wakley Creek comes into the Wisconsin River. So it's one of our new projects down here.
This looks like an interesting fence.
Yeah, this is one of our projects in the last couple of years, is to get some of the fences up that would have been here. Fences today, a lot of people put in their front yard just to look nice. But fences during the 1800s, the middle part of the 1800s that we're portraying here, were very much used. And this is a fence, this style of fence is known as stake and rider. Because these things are known as the stakes, the uprights, and then the logs going across are called the riders. And it was a fairly secure fence. You can see there's a lot of wood in that fence. When it was put up, it was meant to stay. And they were often put around farm fields, and this right behind is our agricultural field, which we plant the crop into every year. Other fences would be put up as well. We already looked at the fence around the garden that was to keep the rabbits out. We've got one other kind of fence over here, and this is a more temporary fence. It's what's known as a Virginia rail fence, or a wormwood fence, and it would be just putting logs down, crisscrossing them as they go. It was real temporary. You put in, if you wanted to move it, change the use of the field behind it, whatever, pick it up and move it. Nothing was sunk down into the ground. So it's one of the two major kinds of fences that were used. Both of them use a lot of wood, but at the time there was a lot of wood and it was cheap. You're using split logs rather than cut logs, because anything that you wanted to have cut, if you wanted to have a fancy board fence, you'd probably only have that around the house, because in that case you have to take your logs, take them to the sawmill, get them cut, bring them back. Here you could just split your logs and start building fence right away.
Is there formerly a building here?
Actually, this one we've kind of cheated on. This is a building that we put up last year. We called our shed, for obvious reasons. And it's of the style that would have been found in the middle part of the 1800s. But we don't know for sure that there was a building like this. We know from some of the records that we've run into that at one point there were 10 to 12 buildings here at what was called the settlement of Point Bass. Right now we've only got 2 of them that remain. And this one we put up because we needed some storage space. Just like the Wakeleys would have had to store, in this case, lumber and some of their agricultural tools like fanning mills and corn shellers and that sort of thing. We needed a place to store the things like that we had. We also had a lot of lumber that we needed to put to use, so last year a few of us got together and we put this shed up. Again, we're not sure there was one right here, but it's of the correct style for the time. Built with big timbers inside. The outside is all rough cut 1x timber, a full-inch thick timber, and the roof is cedar shingles. Every one of those shingles had to be nailed on one at a time. That took the most time of the whole thing.
Planning to restore this barn?
We were planning on it, but it's really gotten too far away. It's become too degraded that we really can't get in there and restore it. So we're going to be taking it down. 2 reasons for that. We could just, I guess, light a match to it, but there's a lot of good wood left in there. It's actually kind of interesting. Some of the wood that's used in that barn has been used in at least 2 or 3 barns before this. Because when you've got big pieces of wood, if you can reuse them, it's a whole lot better to do that than go out and try to buy new ones. The other reason we're taking this barn down is because it's really too young. The site here, when the Wakeleys were most active, was between about 1840 and 1860. This barn was built about 1910, about 50 years after the Wakeleys' settlement here at Point Bass began to go downhill. So it's too young. So what we're going to be doing is taking this barn down and hopefully replacing it with one that's of the right style for the time period.
This path behind me to the old school.
Okay, let's go. We should probably stop and show off how it runs into the Wisconsin River. Normally it would be running. Normally it would be on the 1800s, that is. In this case, we're right at the head of the Peat Mill Reservoir. So this is actually part of the lake that was backed up by Peat Mill Lake. So it's changed some since the Wakeleys. This bridge was probably one of the main bridges to get across this creek. There's a road that goes right behind the schoolhouse that comes up from actually all the way up to the Portage, which is named out of the Portage. So the grounds. Come across here, go across the creek. Head out in front of the Wakley house and take the ferry across the river. We built this bridge about 9 years ago now. To get the hills here and all down.
How old this bridge is
Well,
ahead?
the bridge up there, which goes across Wakley Creek, is, well, it's more than 100 years old, that's for sure. We have actually the receipt from when the town of Saratoga bought the stones that make up that bridge from Robert Wakley. I don't remember the date on it. I think it was in the 1860s, maybe the 1870s. And it's actually one of the last remaining stone arch bridges that's in Wisconsin on a public road. That's Wakley Road that goes across the top of it. And most bridges have been replaced with something more modern. But that bridge is made out of stones, and they're all wedged together so that they make up that arch. There's no metal reinforcing inside. It's kind of like the arches you see on old buildings. And it is one of the oldest bridges still in use in Wisconsin. So you can hear it on the Portage. This was the highway. Times have changed a little bit, but I mean, if you imagine, again, in the 1800s, no automobiles, no trucks, it was all wagons and winter sleighs. So having something about this wide was enough. And this was part of that old road that, as you follow this up, actually goes up a hillside. You can see where it's actually cut into the hillside because so many wagons had gone across it through the years. It just cut down through the hillside. So it's kind of neat. This is a piece of that old road. And it went from here and then would continue on up through Grand Rapids, what we now call Wisconsin Rapids, up to Wausau, and then keep going from there. But this was, think of this as being Highway 13, but no yellow line in the middle.
Schoolhouse?
Well, in a lot of ways, it probably wasn't a lot different than what it's like to live today. You know, for you, in the 1840s, you would have gone to school. Rather than writing with a computer, the way you might today, you probably wrote on a slate board, right? And when you got home, the chores that you had to do might be a little different. Rather than going to the store to buy milk, you might have to milk the cow instead. You might have to fetch water from the pump rather than just turning on the tap inside your house. But a lot of the things that you do today, you'd have to do the same sort of things, you just do them a little differently. What we're hoping to do here at Point Bass is to give people a chance to understand what it was like to live in the 1840s. This was a little town of historic Point Bass. It was run by Robert Wakley and his family. Town in Nakusa developed on the other side of the river, so Point Bass really never took off as a town. But it was active. It was a place where you took the ferry across the river for a lot of years in the latter half of the 1800s. We're always looking for people to come down and help out. Help out to try to make this place what's called a living history site. Because what we want to do is have people who when they come down here, when we get things a little closer to being done, and actually come down and see what it was like to live in the 1840s. So we're always looking for volunteers to help out and help us with some of the restoration projects, help us with the gardens and building fences and all those sorts of things.
This is Kristen Rail signing off. For your time.
Certainly. I hope we come back for one of our festivals or other times that we're open down here and see what we're all about.
This is Kristen Rail signing off.